Coming to you from his studio in downtown San Francisco, this is the Backstage Bay Area podcast. And now, here's your host, Steve Roby.
Hey, welcome everyone. This is Backstage Bay Area. Thanks for joining us. I'm Steve Roby. Today we're joined by pianist Aaron Diehl, an artist whose work moves fluidly between jazz and classical music. Whether he's leading his trio, exploring Mary Lou Williams music, or performing with major orchestras, he brings a strong sense of form, swing, and color to everything he plays. Aaron joins me now. Hi, Aaron. Welcome to Backstage Bay Area.
Pleasure to be here, Steve. Thank you.
Hey, before we get into the music, where am I reaching you today?
I'm in Brooklyn, New York. It's where I reside.
All right. Hope things are good there today.
Nice and warm, 80 degrees.
I wish I could say the same in San Francisco, but we're getting by. Aaron, you grew up in Columbus, and your grandfather, Arthur Baskerville, was an early musical influence. What do you remember most about those first sounds around the piano?
I'd say that he was my first influence in music because I was fortunate to have a grandfather who played piano and trombone. Trombone was his first instrument. And actually, at probably about 4 or 5 years old, my parents bought a little baby grand piano for their living room. My grandfather would often come over and play tunes, standards from the American songbook or jazz standards. And I would listen to him play and often be very curious about how he made this music. And so I remember one Christmas, I was trying to teach myself Christmas tunes because I loved Christmas tunes. So I would try to teach myself Christmas tunes on the piano, and I would basically just by trial and error figure out how to create these melodies that I heard in my ear on this instrument. And my grandfather would sometimes try to help me out with that. Later on, when I was a little older and I had formal piano lessons, started having, formal training, I would go to jam sessions that my grandfather would maybe sit in and participate in. And I remember he and a friend, a buddy of his who often would play drums, his name was Billy Brown. They'd play sometimes at this Saturday jam session around the corner from where I grew up. And they would want me to sit in. And I was always very intimidated by this because I didn't really understand the mechanics of how this music worked and the language. And so I would always decline. And unfortunately, he passed away, the drummer, Mr. Brown, he passed away before I started playing jazz. But I always wondered what he would think, knowing that I became a jazz pianist, right? And so anyhow, so I think I was very lucky to be exposed to music, especially jazz music from an early age. It was really just a part of kind of the activities of going to little jazz festivals or performances. Like that was just part of me growing up.
Sure.
And I think that's ultimately what influenced me later on, really pursuing it as a vocation.
Well, let's pivot ahead to present day and talk about some of your music. The first track I'm going to play on the show is called Scorpio. It's from your recording of Mary Lou Williams' Zodiac Suite. What drew you to it, and what makes it such a strong fit for your trio and the Knights?
Well, I'd say that I have a very personal relationship with Mary Lou Williams' music, and that's initially what drew me to Zodiac Suite because Father Peter O'Brien, who was Williams' manager for the last 20 years of her life, I got a chance to know him years ago. I grew up Catholic and grew up going to actually a Black Catholic church in Columbus, Ohio, on the Near East Side. And so when I met Father O'Brien, I think when I was still a student at Juilliard, I told him that I had grown up in a Catholic church, and he found that to be very intriguing because he had mentioned that Mary Lou Williams converted to Catholicism in the mid-50s, and he wanted to introduce me to her sacred works, which I had, up to that point, hadn't been familiar with. I was playing in a Catholic church up in Harlem at the time, St. Joseph of the Holy Family, And he actually, as a guest presider, guest priest, oftentimes, have guest priests come in to say mass, and he said mass a few times there, and he told me when he was there, he says, we should do Mary Lou Williams' sacred works, some of her sacred works at St. Joseph. And so that was 2006. So that was sort of the beginning of my journey into exploring her music, particularly her sacred works, but her music in general. So when Zodiac Suite came around, I always knew about it. It was always one of her more well-known pieces. And for those of you who are listening who aren't familiar with Zodiac Suite, she wrote, each movement was a zodiac sign and dedicated to musicians and friends of hers who had those signs. So that occurred in 1944. And she was very inspired by Duke Ellington's Black, Brown, and Beige. I think that's an important point to make.
Yeah, right.
And so initially the Zodiac Suite was just for either solo piano or trio. And then she expanded it for a larger ensemble, a chamber ensemble. She premiered at Town Hall. And so this version never saw the light of day, to the best of my knowledge, after the premiere. And I think she had a lot of frustration with it. It was, didn't have a lot of rehearsal time. She didn't have a lot of preparation time. She was being coached by Milton Orant, who was her friend and someone who was a staff arranger at NBC. And so she hadn't had a lot of experience with orchestration at that time. And so I think it was just a case of, we tried that, but on to the next thing after Town Hall. And so this particular arrangement resurfaced, I think, around 2011, but I wasn't really aware of it until much later, actually, until after Father O'Brien died. And I decided to, as a pandemic project, to pursue this work and just to see, if it could be revived and what's there and what can be learned from her journey. And Mary Lou Williams, of course, is someone who was constantly evolving as not only as a pianist, but as a composer. I mean, if you go from 1930, her playing Nightlife, which was pure stride piano, and, fast forward to later works like her masses or sacred pieces. I mean, she really ran the gamut stylistically and was truly always on the avant-garde and in the very true sense of the term. So a Zodiac Suite was really a personal passion project of mine, if you will. And that I've always been a big admirer of Mary Lou Williams' work, and I wanted to see what could be explored in this particular arrangement. Of course, that led me to collaborating with the Knights, which is a New York-based orchestra. It's been an incredible journey, for sure.
Let's explore it now. This is Scorpio, here on Backstage Bay Area. was Scorpio from Aaron Diehl's recording of Mary Lou Williams' Zodiac Suite. Aaron is my guest today on Backstage Bay Area. Aaron, let's play another one of your songs. Let's turn to the song Polaris from the Vagabond. This piece has a steady pulse and is a very clear shape, but it keeps unfolding as it goes. How do you keep a piece like that moving and alive?
Being present with the musicians on stage with me and constantly allowing the music to unfold in a very patient way. I think that's a trait that I place more importance on as I hopefully mature as a musician and as a person. And I think, it's not very complicated, in the improvisational section in this piece. I mean, it's basically just what we call a pedal tone, just on G. And it sits on G, and it's a groove and sort of the tradition of, what they call the poinciana groove of Ahmad Jamal, of Vernel Fournier playing, but it really originates in New Orleans and that groove. And just sitting with the groove and letting it naturally blossom and evolve, and there being a point where there needs to be some kind of resolution, which is ultimately when we go back to the bridge. And Polaris, of course, is the North Star, and I've always had a little bit of a fascination with astronomy, and I think at the time I was writing this, I think I was reading something about the cosmos, and I was like, let me write this little piece. So yeah, in terms of how to keep the music moving, I think it's all dependent on how much the musicians are willing to be fully present and fully engaged with each other on the bandstand, but at the same time allowing for patience and time for the music to naturally evolve. And the music will speak to musicians, will speak to us on stage. It will come to us if we allow it and not force it.
Well, let's listen to it now. And when we return, I'll ask Aaron about his upcoming SFJAZZ appearance. This is Polaris here on Backstage Bay Area. That was Polaris by Aaron Diehl. Aaron is my guest today. Aaron, let's pivot now to your upcoming San Francisco show. You'll be bringing your trio to SFJAZZ's Minor Auditorium. What do you enjoy about playing in a room like that and that has that kind of clarity?
I think the word clarity was an incredibly appropriate term because it's one of the most clear halls I think that I've performed in over the years, and it's a hall that it has the presence of a larger hall, but it has the acoustics and the sense of intimacy of a smaller one, and I think that's a perfect combination.
The ticket page for the show still lists the personnel as TBA, so I'm curious who's going to be joining you on stage for this performance.
On bass will be David Wong. On drums will be Aaron Kimmel.
All right. So what does each of those musicians bring to the music that keeps the group fresh for you?
They're consummate professionals when it comes to execution of the music, but they're both incredibly creative. They're very sensitive musicians. A place like Minor is a perfect hall for Aaron and David because they aren't musicians who overplay. Have a very acute listening and a sense of awareness. Of course, understanding of the material and the language, but I think more importantly, they're incredibly empathetic as artists. And it makes for a very enjoyable experience playing with them.
As far as the music goes, what can we look forward to in your set?
There are going to be a lot of original compositions from previous albums. We'll play a few new pieces that I'm working on, short pieces. And then I think we'll play a few of these Sir Roland Hannett preludes that I've played over the years that he wrote for originally piano and bass, but we've also included drums in the mix too. So it's going to be, I think, a varied set. and hopefully a set that people will walk away feeling better than when they walked into the hall. So we're really looking.
What do you hope the music that you're going to play that night stays with them?
I hope to achieve is for listeners to find some sense of value and worth that's personal to them and the music that they're hearing. And that could be different for every individual. But I do want people to, especially in the times we're experiencing right now, get a sense of peace and comfort and serenity in experiencing the music that we play for them.
Absolutely. That is so important these days.
Absolutely.
And let me remind our listeners, you can catch the Aaron Diehl Trio live at the SFJAZZ Center's Minor Auditorium in San Francisco on Sunday, April 26th at 7 p.m. Tickets and full details are available now at sfjazz.org. And for more about Aaron's work and his latest recordings, visit aarondiehl.com. Both links will appear in the podcast show notes. Aaron, thank you so much for joining me and sharing more about your music and this upcoming Bay Area performance.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Thanks to our listeners for joining us on Backstage Bay Area. Please stay tuned for these important messages.
Are you a jazz musician preparing for a run in San Francisco? The Backstage Bay Area podcast wants to help tell your story. We are currently filling our guest lineup with the artists keeping the jazz scene alive. If you have dates booked at a local club or concert hall, let's get you on the mic to discuss your latest work. Connect with us directly. Send an email to backstage.sfbay@gmail.com. Just let us know when you'll be playing in San Francisco. That's backstage.sfbay@gmail.com.
Backstage Bay Area is dedicated to keeping jazz alive in the 415 by spotlighting the artists, presenters, and venues that sustain this music. The most meaningful way to support local jazz is simple. Show up, buy a ticket, and experience the music live. Visit BackstageBayArea.com and explore our upcoming concerts section, featuring both a weekly guide and a weekend guide to jazz shows across the region, plus the latest concert news. Thank you for keeping jazz alive in the 415.
You've been listening to the Backstage Bay Area podcast. Visit us on the web at BackstageBayArea.com. And don't forget to keep jazz alive in the 415.